coming. Sorry you're tired than normal, but appreciate you being here. Yeah, thank you for coming. My name is Allison Moy. I'm on the Dish Women's Network leadership team, and I'm very excited to talk to this lovely lady today. Our Kathy Schneider, our SVP of Customer Service at Dish, is our women in the industry person today. So I'm excited to hear more about Kathy. She's been at Dish for over 10 years, and I've had the pleasure of working for her back in the day when I interned in my first few years at Dish. I was head in her organization. So she's been one of the first leaders that I've looked up to since I worked here. So I'm excited to hear more from her. And you guys will obviously hear the same as well. So with that, we'll turn it over to Kathy. If you can kind of just tell us more about yourself and additional of that.
Well, first, thanks guys for coming today, and thanks for having me. This is really exciting to be standing in front of, or sitting in front of all of you and doing this interview. So just a little bit about myself. So I was born and raised in Minnesota. I went to school, both undergrad and grad school, at the University of Minnesota back in the day. I started my career in the airline industry and spent a number of years there. And the airline industry is really similar to Dish in one way, and that is they hire for certain skills and capabilities, and once you get in there, you can move all over in the industry and do all sorts of different roles, and I did that. So that was a great lead-in to Dish, which, as Allison mentioned, I've been here for about 10 years. I started in the finance function here, and about 4 years into my tenure here, I moved into customer service. So just like the airline industry, we hire for certain things here, and you have the opportunity to move up and around and do all sorts of different things. So that's a little bit of an introduction to where I've been in my career.
Yeah. So what brought you to Dish?
So a couple of things. So one, I think everybody probably knows the name Bernie Hahn, right? So Bernie, I was at a point in my career in the airline industry, I'd been doing it for about 15 years, and I'd gotten to a point where I was looking for a change and thinking about doing something different outside of the airline industry, and felt that the time was, I either make the change now, or I'm going to be kind of a lifer in that industry. So I was really looking for a change, and happened to get a phone call from somebody that I used to work for on the airline side, and that was Bernie. And so Bernie described this opportunity to come and work for this company, and to come in and develop the financial planning and analysis function, which was pretty, back in the day, there was just a handful of people working in the function, and not as much of the structure that you might find typically for a Fortune 200 company. So he said it's a great opportunity for you to come in and build a team and build the processes around financial planning and analysis, and I was really excited about that opportunity. And then I also thought about Bernie as a leader. I always admired him, and always, when I worked for him, I always saw the people that worked directly for him becoming better leaders, managers, analysts. He's really one of the best teachers out there. So I really thought it would be a great opportunity for me to learn a new industry, to kind of put my stamp on a department and kind of build something from the ground up, and also have the experience of working for somebody that I really admired and saw people grow under. And so that's why I came to Dish.
Awesome. And kind of with that, so you've been here for over 10 years, so what are the parts that have brought you to stay here, basically?
Yeah, so I think, number one, I talk about the people that I work with and for every day. So I think the people here at Dish are just really, really smart. I think you can learn a lot from the folks here, and I have a lot of fun working with the people every single day. So I think people is probably one of the top things. I think that I came from an industry that was pretty complex, but as complex as airlines are, I have found Dish to be even more complex than that. And so there's just always great learning opportunities, which is something I really enjoy about the business I work, is just always having the opportunity to learn something new. Speaking of opportunities, again, I think you have certain skills and capabilities. I think there's just tons of opportunity. We talk about that as being one of the best benefits of working for Dish, is kind of the opportunity to move up, around, and do really whatever you want to do. So who would have thought a finance person would have ended up running a large customer service organization, but here I am doing that.
So not to touch too much more on the airline industry, but I think one of the kind of easy things you can say that both of the TV and the airline industry have is that they're ever evolving. The airline industry a few years ago had big evolution, and
Yeah.
we're continuing to have one today at Dish. How do you kind of navigate an evolving industry, and can you give me tips on how to adapt in the workplace?
Yeah, so I worked in the airline industry during a lot of kind of key events. So, I mean, you think of things like the conflicts in the Middle East that affected fuel prices, or things like SARS or 9/11, or just all that industry overcapacity that we had and that had to be rationalized. And I worked in that industry during all of that change. So it's interesting to work in an industry during great times of change. But I think what I would say is we always stayed focused on a few things. So one is your people, right? So all the people. So if the managers sitting in the room, when you have and they're going through times of change in your industry, that you always have to remember the people working for you and how important communication is to those people. So you try to focus on that. I think you also want to focus on the basics, right? And making sure that you're running your business as well as you possibly can during all those times. So you really have to stay focused. It can be different things depending on what department you work in. So when I was working in finance, it was about managing cash and making sure you had a great budget and that people were held accountable for the things that they did. But that changes depending on what department that you work in. So you want to make sure that you stay focused on those basics and doing those really, really well. But at the same time, we were never afraid of taking risks in our industry, especially those that had a payoff within a short period of time. So if you're making investments or you're being inventive in certain things, you always want to make sure that you're willing to do those things even when things are changing rapidly. You have to be open to doing those types of things to continue to make your business better. And I think just as a general rule, being very open to change and the things that you can learn from that. It creates lots of learning opportunities. It creates lots of opportunities to grow. And you think of yourself on the other side of things and kind of keeping a positive attitude, and that kind of gets you through some days where you wonder how things are going to come out. Yeah.
So I know you and I kind of talked about personal leadership style a bit. Can you kind of share yours with the team and what it's been like to be a female leader at Dish?
So this has become a little bit of a cliche now, and a lot of people talk about this, but I think it's a really good way of thinking about leadership, which is the servant leadership model. So it's, and I believe this, you really have to be, and I try to be a resource for my people and make sure that they have all the things that they need to do their jobs really, really well, whether that's developing them, whether it's getting them certain things that they need, resources that they need to do their jobs. And so that's one thing. I would say, another thing is that everybody's a little bit different, right? So the amount of resources and what you need to do your job is different depending on what employees need. So some employees really prefer much more hands-off, and I'm happy to do that. Some employees need more direct supervision, and I'm happy to do that when that's necessary. So you have to kind of vary your leadership style depending on who you're working with. But I think, maybe most importantly, as a leader, you have to have a trusting relationship with your employees. That's just paramount. You have to do things, and you have to have a positive and trusting relationship with your employees, which is key.
I know you kind of mentioned Bernie called you when you were at the airline to see if you're interested in coming here.
Yeah.
Do you have any other sponsors or mentors or kind of with that, any advice on how people can better establish those type of relationships?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say I really have a formal mentor or sponsor, but there are people that I've looked up to in my career. There are people who've sort of taken an interest in, so Bernie's an example of one of those people who's taken an interest in my career and kind of has helped me along the way. And so I think, especially early on in your career, you have the ability to use kind of the power of observation to look at leaders who have characteristics that you admire. You can also look at leaders, we all have characteristics or things that we can do better on, and you can kind of use those as models to build who you want to be in the workplace. And I think those relationships and establishing those relationships are really important. And I'd say generally that, certainly at DISH we have an open door policy, and I think most leaders here are very open to having conversations and establishing relationships. So I think you just kind of have to make those first moves and inroads, and certainly you can work with a manager and so on to kind of help facilitate that. But I think generally people are super open to meeting, to providing advice, and to helping folks out in their careers.
So when looking at diversity in the workplace, what are ways that we can engage men in the movement of diversity in the workplace?
I think, diversity, certainly men and women, that's one form of it, and there's all sorts of different forms, whether it's cultural differences or all sorts of different types of arrangements in the workplace. But what I tell the guys who work for me is just, I try to just help them be aware of how they're thinking about things. And I think that it's just very much human nature to kind of tend to want to be around people who are like you, right? It's just, you have things in common and the conversations are easy, and it's really easy to form relationships with people who are like you. And that can mean men form more relationships with men, or women form more relationships with women. And so I just try to, challenge the men who work for me to kind of think about that, and think about, as they're making decisions, and it can be a decision about hiring somebody or promoting somebody, or it can be, something as simple as asking somebody to go out to a group lunch, to just think about, being inclusive when making those types of decisions. And you always hire the best person for a job, but you want to make sure that you're making the right types of decisions and basing that on broader things.
This is kind of one of my favorite questions, I think, when we ask our leaders in these series. So DISH is known to have some of the best and brightest employees and kind of a work hard, play hard mentality. And I think people have different definitions on if or how they have a work-life balance. And so I know you have probably one of the more interesting commutes of anyone in the room. So if you kind of share more on that, and just if you have a work-life balance and what that kind of looks like for you.
Yeah, so I think it's important to have that, right? So people who work, who don't have that, I think tend to burn out, right? Just from my observations. So you have to create that balance. And so for me, I have, as Allison mentioned, kind of an interesting situation in that I still have a home and family back in Minnesota. And so I commute here. So I'm here in Denver. I have kind of a second home here in Denver, right? So I'm here 5 days a week or more, depending on what needs to be done. But here generally 5 days a week, and then I'm back in Minnesota on weekends. And so it's kind of a very, relative to the way most people live their lives, it's a very compartmentalized kind of lifestyle that forces a bit of work-life balance. So when I'm here in Denver 5 days a week, I am almost, completely focused on work with like a little bit of side stuff. And when I'm back home, you always have your devices with you, so you're in touch, but you're, a little bit more focused on home stuff. And so I think just having that very compartmentalized lifestyle sort of facilitates that for me. But I think even if I didn't have that, even if I weren't doing that, you have to make time to do both things, to be a well-balanced person and happy person. Yeah.
So giving and receiving feedback, and also I think just general, PA season comes around.
Yeah.
Every year the reminder is make sure you're not having the conversation just once a year as a manager or with your manager. And so do you have any kind of tips or ways you'd like to share on how you've given feedback throughout the years, and advice on how to make sure you also receive it as well?
Yeah. So very early. So feedback is something that I consider to be very, very important. And so very early on in my career, the first manager I ever worked for, super nice guy, really smart, and really generally cool. But he was very positive all the time in his feedback, always. So when it came time for the class that I came in with, some of us were going to get promoted, some of us weren't. I had in my head, based on the feedback I'd received, being very positive, that I was going to be on track and one of the people who got promoted, and I wasn't. And so that came as a very big surprise to me, which we all know feedback shouldn't come as a surprise. And so at that point, I had to really kind of push my manager to tell me, what it was, what were the areas I could get better on, so that I could get that promotion that I really, really wanted. And so he eventually told me, and so just always kept that experience very close to me as I've gotten to be a manager. And I've just thought, when you don't share feedback with people, when you're not honest about how they're doing, you're taking away opportunities from them. So when we go through our annual PA process here at Dish or anywhere that I've worked, I've always taken that as a very, not just during PA process really, but all year long, as a very serious part of my job as a manager in providing feedback to people so that they have all the opportunities available, and it's not, I haven't taken anything away from people by not providing them the feedback that they need to get better. And so that's what I think about. And I also think about delivery too with feedback. So I think that you always want to deliver feedback in a very honest way, but also being very kind to people. So you always have to keep in mind how people feel. It's not just the words you use. It's also about how you make them feel during that process. And so you need to be very cognizant of being crisp and clear and effective, but also very kind, so people feel good about it at the end of the day.
Is there anything that you change, or looking back at your career, anything you change or maybe do differently, whether it's at Dish or in the airline industry?
So I think that I've generally been pretty deliberate about my career and what I've done in different moves. But having said that, I haven't always made perfectly, like every decision hasn't been perfect. But having said that, I think that you have the opportunity to learn from every good or bad decision, every right or wrong decision. And so if you take a position that's not the perfect position for you, then you learn what you don't like to do. So next time you can do something different. Or you make a decision on something that's not quite right, you learn from those things and move forward. So I would say even with missteps that I've made in my career, poor decisions, you always learn something and have the opportunity to learn from it. So, and take that and make a better decision next time.
Do you have any advice for women here on how to be successful at Dish and in their long-term career, whether it's here or at other companies as well?
So, I think it's whether you're a woman or a man in your career, there's just some general things, which is, I think first you have to find something that you really like to do and you're pretty passionate about it. I think it's, that makes work fun and easier. I think that generally, you can also go back to things that your parents told you when you were 5 years old, and it's things like, always doing your best and working hard, and just some of those simple rules about how to do well in life, I think apply to your work life as well. And so I think those types of things. I think find something you love to do, work hard at it, always do your best, and those are the types of things I think that get you ahead.
Awesome. Well, those are the questions that I have for Kathy, so we can open up to the floor for anybody that has any questions. Okay. Sam?
So Kathy, you're an SVP now. What's next in your career path?
I'm not super focused on titles, right? So SVP is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. And I'm pretty happy with the job I have now. So I consider, I've been in it for 6 years, but it keeps changing and evolving, and it's still really interesting to me. So I keep doing this job as long as it's interesting. But having said that, I'd be happy to explore some other areas as well, right? So I'm open to things where I can use kind of the skills and abilities to help myself get better and help Dish get better. So I'm not sure exactly what that is, and I would say I'm happy doing what I'm doing now, but I'm open to doing other things as well.
What are some of the things you're passionate about outside of work?
So outside of work, there's a couple of things that I really love to do. So one is I have this really old house back in Minnesota. So it's about 100 years old.
What town?
My house is in Minneapolis.
I'm from Minnesota.
Okay. So one of the things I love to do is, kind of renovate and keep working on this old house that I have, which is cool. It's I could say it's done, but I keep working on it. So that's one thing that's really fun to me. I have a passion for, I love to garden, which it's kind of funny how, my parents used to drag me, or my mom specifically, would drag me to the garden centers when I was a kid, and I used to not really like it. And so it's now, it's funny that years later I've kind of become my mom in terms of my passion for being a gardener. But and what was really exciting is this summer I had a garden tour at my house, which was really cool. So people actually paid money to come see my garden as part of this charity tour. So that was really fun. So those are a few of the things that I like to do when I'm not working.
So what's the most challenging thing you faced here in your career in Dish?
So I think, challenging things are always, usually the things that make your job really interesting. And so I think one of the most challenging things about the job I have today is that there's a lot of people. So we have about 8,000 customer service agents working for Dish today. And I think that one of the challenging things is getting 8,000 people to understand the complex business we have and all kind of row in the same direction. And so, having people do things consistently and well and so on is one of the most challenging parts. But it's also really fun too. Yeah.
What triggered your change from finance to CSE?
So again, it was Bernie. Bernie was the, when I started here was the CFO, and he moved down to be the COO, and the person who was in customer service working for him ended up moving on to a different opportunity. And so historically it had been kind of a function where you would take calls and do that really, really well, right? So make sure you answer the calls on time and you have enough people in the right skills to answer the phone calls or trained and all that kind of stuff. So we were very focused on kind of that piece of it. But what Bernie's vision was to have, since you're getting all those phone calls and you understand what folks are calling about and you can start to identify kind of themes and pain points for customers, that puts you in a position to start looking upstream and fix the things that are plaguing customers. And so I think he was kind of looking for a different type of person to take on the role. So I can teach you the call center side of the business, but kind of some of the logic and redesign skills that you might have as more of an analyst is a little harder to teach somebody. So he's looking for somebody who had that quality. And so, as well as I think decent people skills. And so again, Bernie, as a person who's been very helpful in my career, approached me about taking this role on. And so, although it was, it's super different and it was a little intimidating at first, it's been a really, really interesting job and a really great change for me.
Since you have changed roles, like done very different things, finance, CSE, other things that you've done, what's some advice on how you should approach a significant function change or role change?
So when I moved to the most current role, I think it's like don't make any changes too quickly, right? So take some time to learn your people and learn the business that you're going to be managing, and when you feel like you have a decent understanding, then start to make some changes. But you just, like in my mind, you sort of give it a little time to learn things before you make wholesale changes in it. So that not only makes your people feel more comfortable, but you also don't want to make silly decisions that you'll regret later.
Hi. So as someone who's led the CSE on the Dish TV side, structured in a way that supports a high margin business like the Dish side, how do you see the landscape changing from a customer service standpoint for closely. Because it is a low margin product, we don't have as much luxury. We have the luxury of using dish resources today. But how do you see that landscape changing as we move forward?
Yeah, so for slang, like you just, you need to have customers who can help themselves. I think that's the most. So you need to take the right kind of customers, and then you need to create really great self-service tools for customers so that the majority of your customers can find what they need. So if we're doing things the way those customers want, those customers typically don't want to pick up the phone and have to call us ever for anything. And so we have to continue to work to kind of fill the deficits in self-serve tools and make those great so that if a customer, it's only on rare occasions that a customer would ever have to, chat with us or ask us a more complex question. But certainly we cannot afford to have the number of customers picking up the phone and calling us and talking to an agent when it costs us $3 or $4 a phone call, which just doesn't work. You're right. You're absolutely right.
What are some of your greatest accomplishments here at Dish so far?
So I think, so the accomplishments I have are team accomplishments, and I would say one that comes to mind is what the team really across the company has done with what we call contact rate, which is the number of customers who call us every month divided by the subscribers that we have. And so when I started in the position, we had a contact rate that was near 70. So you can think of it as being the percentage of customers who call you every month. It's not exactly that, but that's a lot of phone calls. And so we've about at this point, through the efforts of folks across the company and creating better self-serve and fixing upstream problems and so on. And there's some freebies in there in that we've started taking better quality subs. You don't call us as much. But I think in that we've knocked about 35 points off of that contact rate number now. That's a pretty significant achievement that saved us a lot of money as a company and has, I think more importantly, created better customer experiences for our subs. And so that's not necessarily my achievement, but that's an achievement that we share with everybody who's done things to make those experiences better over the past 5 or 6 years that I've been in this position. So that's a big one that comes to mind.
So what do you think our biggest opportunity as CSC is for the next upcoming year?
So I think I'd say the customer experience initiatives that we have started on, that's a really big opportunity. So the contact rate reductions that we've had so far have been done more on a touch point basis. And so while we've created a lot better experiences, we need to start looking at kind of the whole of journeys for customers. And in doing that, that's the way that you start increasing customer satisfaction. And so I think that as much as we've worked well cross-functionally, I think that we could take that a notch higher and continue to kind of draw more people into the process of looking at things end to end and figuring out how we do better handoffs and so on to kind of make those customer experiences even better. So I think that's kind of driving that cultural shift to get more and more people involved in that process, I think is one of the bigger things that we will work on over the next year.
I think we all know that Basecamp has become a real high priority, and a big focus of Basecamp is CSC. What benefits have you seen so far in terms of for the people here at Meridian and the folks in the call center for the synergies we're building on Basecamp?
Yeah, so I think Basecamp, we were really excited. The CSC, we were really excited when this Basecamp concept started being discussed. And we're really happy to be a part of that process because I think it's easy to become disconnected from what's happening out in the field. And so I think that if you're sitting here, that is to say, right, and not working day to day with things that directly affect customers or our frontline employees. And so I think that it's been a great program. We need to get as many people through it as fast as we can. But I think what we're starting to see, and what we hope to see, is that when we're making decisions as a company, that customers and employees are part of the conversation. So how is the decision I'm about to make going to affect customers? How is the decision I'm about to make? How do we execute that and make that something that the frontline employees can deal with? And so I think that is now, and that's more part of the conversation, and people are starting to make better decisions on those fronts as a result of Basecamp. That's a very positive benefit that we're seeing. There's lists of things that we have from base campers who have thought through as they've been sitting there taking the phone calls or turning wrenches as a technician. There's lists of things that they've thought to improve processes, but I think existing processes, but even better than that is starting to think of, as I move forward as a business, how do I make decisions that will be the right decisions to begin with, that don't cause these downstream pain points. So I think both of those things have been very beneficial.
What do you think is the role of a company in positively impacting local communities in which it operates, whether just specifically or just companies in general?
So I think, for the organization that I run, our call centers have always been very involved in the local communities that they're a part of. And I think that it's, the idea of giving back to the communities that we sit in, but also it does really positive things for DISH as well. So when we create an impression, a good impression in the community, then we get people who apply for positions more often and so on. So I think there's an element of giving back, and then there's an element of creating kind of a positive image so that it helps us move forward as a business as well. So I think there's multiple benefits.
Not just at DISH, but across many different companies, there is an underrepresentation of women in senior leadership roles, and there's a lot that contributes to that. As a woman who has kind of blazed a trail during her career path, what have you actively or consciously, if anything, done to kind of fight against that imbalance? Is there something that stood out to you in your mind that you kind of consistently told yourself, or things you've done in order to blaze the trail that you have?
So I think, I've been really lucky to work at companies and with people where they just, they want to put forward, the good, like the best candidate for a job. And it's not necessarily about being a man or a woman, but it's, I think, recognizing the skills and qualifications that you bring to the position, or you could bring to the position. So I've been lucky to work for companies. I don't know that it always works that way, but I think the people I've worked for and the companies I've worked for have been very open to that. And I think as we move forward, there's a lot of young folks in the room who I think will continue to find that to be the case at DISH. So the opportunities to move up when there's more representation at kind of a manager level, we'll start to see those things kind of float up into the upper levels. So I think it takes some time, right? So I started my career many years ago when I started out in finance at Northwest, and there was probably 40 analysts, and there was probably 4 women who worked in the department. And my guess is, Northwest is part of Delta now, but my guess is if you looked in the finance department at Delta now and you looked at the representation of men and women, it'd probably be more equal, maybe not completely equal, but more equal. And so I think just a function of having more women and having the time to kind of see them be able to move into opportunities over time. So I think hopefully we'll see that more balanced as we move forward, but I think it'll take a little bit of time.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi, John.
I especially appreciate you not saying that I'm your biggest challenge. So, as you moved up in your career, there's been more to do, more things to keep top of mind. Do you have any kind of pro tips for how to organize your life, how to keep your thoughts organized when there's always 50 things trying to distract you?
Well, I'm a list person, as you may know. So I think it's, I do kind of organize my life that way, right? Is I create, lists of things I have to do at work, and then it's constantly shifting priorities based on what's most important. But at the end of the day, you get all those things checked off. So if you, Charlie has this great philosophy of having a notebook, right? I see one right there, a spiral notebook, where you write all your stuff down, and then when you sign it, you put a little dash. When you finish it, you complete the dash and make it an X, and it becomes just a record that you can use to organize your thoughts and make sure that you get to all of the items eventually on your checklist. So that's actually worked really well for me. So I think I organize my life and my work with lists, and I'm sure there's all sorts of different ways of doing it, but that's what I do.
I was just going to say, in general, because you had such a great career and you're not done yet, but surely you've had conflict and conflict resolution, and especially started off with that manager who didn't communicate with you. What are some of the tips that you can give folks that maybe they're managers, maybe they're people working under managers? I mean, some of the things that you've seen that have really worked as far as conflict resolution.
Yeah, so I'm a Midwesterner, so I probably am a little, like the way I just, I'm kind of a straight shooter with folks. I always try to stay pretty even keeled, and I just try to be honest and calm with people, and when kind of talking about things that are bothering me or whatever. So it's sort of being honest, logical, even keeled, sort of giving yourself the time to kind of gather your thoughts, and just sitting down with people face to face and talking through things that are bothering you. So I think that's what I do to kind of get through conflicts.
Has your boss improved since that initial boss that you had?
I have a great boss. But yeah, he was, by the way, he was good in every other way. He just, I think like a lot of new managers, it's a struggle to provide your people with feedback, because it's, and sometimes like those are tough messages to get across. So I think some people are conflict avoiders, and so he probably just didn't really know how to tell me what he needed to tell me, but we eventually got there. So, but yes, I've had a great string of bosses through the years. I've been lucky.
A second one. Are there any books, leadership books that you just love and that kind of inspired you or gave you, I don't know, insightful recommendations on leadership development?
I am such the wrong person to ask. Like, I don't read any of that stuff. I just don't. And so I just, like I was saying a little bit earlier in the conversation, I'm an observer of what happens in the workplace, and I just sort of, take things in and kind of learn from, great examples, right, of leadership, and I sort of pick the things that, I want to emulate and avoid the things that I don't think work as well, and so it's just, to me, it's been more observing what people do and how they act and trying to copy the good parts. So I wish I had a good answer for you.
Well, it sounds like that's it for the questions. So thank you, everybody, coming in. Thank you, Kathy,
Yeah,
for
thank
sharing
you.
more about your career and everything. So, good. As most of you know, we have a few more events coming up in the next few weeks, so highly encourage you to check those out. We have a wait list, I think, but keep checking that, and as always, we have updates on dishwomansnetwork.com, including the recorded version of this if anybody missed it, if you want to take a second look. But thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening.